Let the truck!
You are listening to What the Truck. Welcome back to What the Truck. I'm Thomas Wasson. It's Wednesday, August 13th. I may look a little bit different. Did I, in fact, get my hair cut? Who knows? It even hides the balding on camera. So guess what, folks? There's hope for all of us. Gonna have a wonderful show today. A little bit rainy here in the Chattanooga area, but we're gonna be talking about the drivers, jobs, and the economy in this episode. We're going to go over some news and headlines, and our guests for today, of course, are going to be Steve Gold. He's the CEO of Truckers Network Association. We're going to be diving into the shifting landscape in trucking jobs and what folks need to know. It's coming up in the second half of the show, we're going to have Michael Rudolph. He's a researcher and economist at FreightWaves. We're going to be getting caught up with some recent economic data, including the CPI and inflation. That's right, folks. It's kind of like one of those things you can bet on. What has gotten more expensive, what hasn't gotten more expensive, but unfortunately, it impacts us all. And then before we dive in, we'd like to, of course, thank our sponsor, Verizon Business. From the facility to the fleet, Verizon Business gives you real-time visibility into your supply chain, so you can keep on trucking ahead of demand and competition. Learn more at verizon.com/distribution. We've got an ad as well. Let's kick it.
Big.
Small.
Essential.
Big. Small. Essential. Big.
Small.
Essential.
Grande.
Pequeño.
Esencial. No matter what business you're in, Verizon Business has the network and solutions you need to power it.
Check them out. Verizon Business. Let's dive into some headlines here. First one's coming up. It's about F3. If you don't know or have been living under a rock like myself, it's the Future of Freight Festival. And so we're highlighting some of the folks that we have speaking at it. It's taking place in Chattanooga, Tennessee on October 21st through 22nd. We're going to have Leland Miller, the CEO of the China Beige Book, talking about China's economy and the impact on global supply chains. Another one of our folks is Jack Kennedy, co-founder and CEO of Platform Science, going to be talking about it. And then finally, rounding out some of our speakers we have mentioned, the keynote roster is Patrick Fuchs, newly appointed chairman of the Surface Transportation Board. And so if you don't know who the STB is, they oversee the rails. And so will our talk stay on the rails or go off the rails? I don't know. You're going to have to find out. While you're at it, use our discount code. We've got a little fancy discount code to save like $900. The code is WTTF325. So that's What the Truck, WTT with an F325. Yes, that's right. We're clever. Plug it in there. Save some money. You know you want to. All right, coming up next, in other news, we're going to be diving into the fact that for the OEMs, they're in an impossible situation by the truck manufacturers. They're filing a lawsuit against the state of California. FreightWaves' John Kingston writes that companies squeezed by the signing of the Clean Truck Partnership and federal steps to block the rules. So let's dive in here what that means here. Yeah, here we go. Truck manufacturers, writes John Kingston, are unfortunately in an impossible situation under the California Advanced Clean Trucks Mandate, or ACT. Several of them have asked a federal court to get them out of it. In a lawsuit filed Monday in the U.S. District for the Eastern District of California, Daimler Truck, PACCAR, Volvo Group North America, and International Motors, owned by Volkswagen, they're asking the court to immediately halt the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, from enforcing ACT. They're saying that it's an impossible term to describe their predicament. The manufacturers are selling out that there's a squeeze, and that many people in the industry saw this squeeze as soon as the federal governments, including the action. It's very long stuff. Basically, when the U.S. government started rolling back regulations, it put the OEMs in a tough pickle because they'd already made deals with CARB in California that they were still going to do stuff. One of the big questions, of course, with CARB is that there was a clause in there that said, well, if it gets taken away at the federal level, you still got to play ball. Now we're in court to figure out how much ball to play. Keep an eye out. It's a developing story. In other news, the EPA is aiming to keep diesel trucks on the road. This writes John Gallagher. The Trump administration has issued new guidance on diesel exhaust fluid, or better known as DEF, DEF, and they're aimed at avoiding engine shutdowns that sideline trucks and cost folks money. This comes as the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Lee Zeldin said on Tuesday he had announced the new guidelines developed in collaboration with manufacturers to ensure that existing diesel trucks, which are using DEF to reduce nitrous oxide emissions, do not experience sudden engine failures, known as D-rates, after running out of the fluid. Starting with model year 2027, all new diesel over-the-road trucks must be engineered to avoid sudden power loss and resulting D-rates after running out of DEF. That's going to be a real fascinating thing to watch. I've had it happen a few times. If you keep your truck idling too much and you don't run it enough over a certain speed, it'll have to do a forced regen. Sometimes I've had drivers even put DEF in the fuel tank. Make sure that you read the handle, folks. In other news, we've got some stuff. It's kind of a wombo combo, Uber Freight and Wabi for these next two stories. The first one is Wabi is appointing Leo Ron as chief operating officer amid a push for commercialization. Leo Ron is the former CEO of Uber Freight. He is spearheading R&D scaling and as the company has their driver out milestone by the end of this year. So, what's happening with Uber Freight? Well, Rebecca Tanucci is named as the CEO of Uber Freight. She's a former Tesla executive. She's taking the helm as the founder and CEO Leo Ron transitions to chairman in addition to his role at Wabi as the chief operating officer. It was a real fun interview. I got to speak with both of them. I wrote the article on that. It's really fascinating to see. The big takeaway from this kind of event is that we are moving forward from AI and digitalization in the software space, which is fancy load boards and ways to connect you. And now the next phase is using AI in the physical space, meaning autonomous trucks. There's still a lot of questions to answer on how they will work and what they should look like and how to make money off of them ahead of some of the planned 2027 releases by OEMs. And so it's going to be one of those situations where keep an eye out. It's very exciting stuff. All right, let's dive into our next guest now. We're going to be talking about the shifting landscape and jobs as well. We're going to be welcoming on Steve Gold, CEO of Truckers Network Association. Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure to get to talk to you in the past, and we're super excited to have you back on the show to talk about drivers.
Hey, Thomas, thanks for having me. Appreciate to be here and lots to talk about drivers right now.
There's quite a bit, and so we can go two ways here. I've got a 2025 driver market forecast, or we can dive into essential considerations for new drivers navigating that market. Let's just get a real high level, and then we'll dive into the nitty gritty on what the current market is.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you have as the 2025 forecast, but I would say in the last 8 weeks, we've seen a notable increase in demand from our customers looking for both newly trained drivers from the 160 Driving Academy, as well as experienced drivers through the Truckers Network Association digital app we have. So something's going on in the industry. Maybe we're coming out of a trough now, and the industry is starting to look for more drivers to fill roles. Or I would say, I know there's this ongoing argument between we don't have enough drivers, there's an oversupply, we have a driver shortage, but I think the question really comes down to qualified safe drivers that a lot of employers are looking for. How do I get safe drivers on the road? And, how do I find those safe drivers that have been quality trained, which is totally different than the total population of drivers out there in the community.
I like that. There's a really fascinating thing on a driver hiring funnel. One of the cool things from this NTI report. You're right. It was released this year looking at last year. It looks like an upside down pyramid. And it talks about the difference between inexperienced applicants outnumber experienced drivers like 3-1. And then talking about like a year of safe driving is considered experience. But the big challenge is how do you find that right tranche for the driver? So like for private fleets and certain motor carriers, they're only going to accept a driver with 2 years. So there's this big gulf between you're fresh out of school, you survive long enough, you get tenure, and then you get picked up. Talk about that, because it looks like the devil lies in the details in the type of tenured driver, maybe one of those impacts.
Yeah, I think it's a great chart. A lot of our customers are rejecting over 50% of their drivers that they're interviewing or taking through like a driver screen or a driver test because they're not qualified or they're not safe or they haven't gone to a legitimate, state licensed school or whatever it might be. All kinds of reasons. I think there's a really high rejection rate for the private fleets, and I think there's a higher rejection for the mega carriers because those companies have really strong safety departments, lots of compliance requirements. They don't want to get in accidents. And, the majority of the industry, individuals with 10 trucks or less, they don't necessarily have those capabilities. So, you might hire a driver who's got 2 years of experience, but who knows where he was trained or how he was trained or where she came from. So, or their past work experience at a different carrier. So it's really hard. So unless you're a big carrier or a big shipper with a private fleet, do you have the capability to evaluate, a driver going, I want to hire this individual or not? So I think that's a great chart because I think we're seeing the exact same thing. So while there might be a lot of drivers out there, the real question is, are there a lot of qualified drivers out there, and who do you really want to hire at the end of the day? Like, there could be a million accountants out there, but if they all failed their, accounting exam and they're not CPAs, you're probably not going to get a job in an accounting department. So same kind of thing here. If you got a lot of drivers out there, but, they're not qualified to really drive safely for you, are you going to ultimately hire them? I think that's ultimately the question on this debate.
And one of the things I keep hearing mentions distribution by age groups as well. So the type of driver has been changing. Let's pull up a distribution by driver population. There's this really cool chart. The blue one is 2024, the silver is 19, and the gold, Throwback Thursday, 1994. The fascinating thing is that this age cohort, 45 to 54 years old, has surged in 2024. And so when we're looking at the types of drivers, are there concerns that the pipeline of younger folks who want to drive is slowly going down? If we're looking at data, especially from that 20 to 24 and 25 to 34 age bracket, it looks like compared to the rest of the population, drivers are in fact much older than the general workforce.
Yeah, I would say that's a super interesting chart. Our data at least in our CDL schools, and we'll graduate, I don't know, close to 25,000 students this year across the country in 44 states, wouldn't show this same distribution. Certainly not the 2024 data. I agree. We're probably skewing closer to a higher population in like 25 to 45. But the 45 to 54 range, we haven't really seen that kind of jump. But certainly we're seeing a lot of younger folks, and I think we're just seeing this recently, more interested in becoming an American truck driver than we have in previous years. That's for sure.
Let's talk about that. I really like the fact you all have unique insights because you have over 25 different states that you have CDL schools in. Talk about some of these trends here. So we have the big data from these folks at the National Transportation Institute, but being on the ground and understanding what's going on, what are some of the trends that you're saying? Are there certain states within that cohort that is business booming, or is it kind of a rising tide is lifting all CDL schools right now?
Yeah, just to correct you, we're in 44 states and we have 153 schools nationwide. To answer that question, I would say it's really market dependent. So like what we're seeing in Chicago and Houston and San Bernardino, California is totally different than what we're seeing in, say, Chattanooga or Memphis schools. So I think it's market dependent on what we're seeing. I would say like in the Midwest, Chicago, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, we're seeing a dramatic increase. Florida, we're seeing an increase. In some states in the Northeast we are, but I would say the Southeast and some of the Western states, like in the Oregon, Washington, Portland, Seattle area, we're not seeing that same kind of increase. So I think it's really market dependent. We're not economists here, so I'm not sure exactly what drives that, whether it's unemployment in those states or those markets or, wages or whatnot. But certainly you almost have to go market by market to see the difference in what's growing, what's staying flat, whatnot. I'd say overall across our network, we're seeing significant growth. What really tells us is a lot of our employer partners are calling us after, there's been plenty of drivers out there for them, but now they're calling us to re-engage, get more students. How do we get more every week kind of thing? And that's something we haven't seen for a little while. So definitely for our business, net, we're definitely seeing an increase in demand from our big employer partners, which are both shippers and carriers.
It kind of ties into my next question here is we're looking at the types of roles that these folks are going to school for to get these CDL schools. Is there any specific areas that are kind of standing out? Or where's the good money at? If I'm just wanting to become a driver, I'm going to apply to the school, get accepted. Where would I like to end up at?
Yeah, well, definitely. I think we're also seeing some wage inflation for new graduates, which is excellent. Um, I think we're starting to see some specialized carrier needs. Not just dry van over the road requirements. We're starting to see some CDLB requirements, and I'm not sure if that's the recent executive order from the administration, but we're starting to see an increase in demand for CDLB drivers. Uh, and I would say overall, maybe some skewing to refrigerated. Most of our students are coming in though, wanting to get any job. What are the options for me? They're not always so decisive, like, oh, I want to work for this carrier and drive this type of truck, or work for this, Pepsi and drag boxes every day up and down the street and make more money and put my back into it. So I think more of our student body is just going, hey, how do I get into this industry? How do I start making a lot of money? And I can do it in 4 weeks through your school and enroll me. And then we have a lot of job options for everyone who graduates. So it's sort of their choice right now. And again, that hasn't been as available, say, as it was 12 months ago. So I think the options for job growth in all kinds of different industries, whether it's a Pepsi or a Swift or somewhere like that, is wide open for a lot of candidates right now.
And I wanted to get your thoughts as well. So 4 weeks, I'm in it. Do you see a lot of applicants where carrier like a Pepsi or a Swift would say, Thomas, I want you to be for my company. Let's get you through the school. Or is it I go into the school and then while I'm doing studying, I'm reaching out to recruiters and stuff like that? How does that kind of work for folks who don't really get to see this type of pipeline, which you guys are really at the very early point of the trucking labor funnel as you guys are bringing in new folks completely to the industry and training them?
Right. We actually work both ways. So we have employers who will underwrite the tuition for our students. So people come in and they want to go work for, say, Swift before they graduate, they can sign up. And in some cases, we have employers that will underwrite that tuition. And then we have others that we're recruiting for those employers, like during school, to your point, or afterwards when they graduate, and we'll concierge them, that's what we call it, into those employers once they get a CDL or once they're almost done getting a CDL. So we work actually both ways with the industry, both shippers and carriers. So, and, we're placing almost, I would say, 85% of our student population into jobs. So, it's either going to choose a job or an employer before they enroll, or they're going to choose during school and then pick where the best fit is for them, whether they can afford to be away from their home and family and they can do a truckload kind of job with Swift, or whether like they want to be home every night and maybe put more labor into it, like I mentioned earlier, work for a Pepsi. So it just depends on the individual, what matches for them, their lifestyle, and how much money they want to make at the end of the day.
Talking about the money and the wages, I wanted to go back to some data here. There's a driver wages roller coaster, which is wild. Private fleet pay versus inflation, and then their own driver wage index. I've heard of private fleets making more money, but it's fascinating to watch that the private fleets appear to be consistently, doing better with the wages. And you look at the blue chart, which is the NTI's for hire stuff, and that one is like a wild roller coaster. And so I'm assuming that if I'm going considerations, things new folks need to consider is that it looks like the private fleets kind of have the better deal right now, but I guess you need like 2 years. So you got to like pay your dues in the for hire space.
Yeah, look, I think, companies like Walmart, this is publicly available, are paying, experienced drivers who are safe, way over $100,000 a year. And, to work for a company like that where there's benefits and it's a, well-known brand, or a Pepsi, that gets people's attention. And, those jobs, you're probably sleeping in your bed more often than you're not at a, over the road truckload carrier. So, for some individuals, that's what they want to do. And if they can qualify, the private fleets also, Pepsi has a much higher profit margin than a lot of truckload carriers all day long. They can afford to pay drivers more, right? So, it's sort of a different mindset than a typical carrier when you go work for a shipper. And I came out of a big shipper. I came out of PepsiCo. So, I understood, we didn't have a huge amount of driver turnover. Like it just was a different kind of model at the end of the day. So, I feel for some of the carriers because they can't just roll out the dough and pay these individuals the same as some of these private fleets are paying for them. It just doesn't work in their financials. So, I think for the private fleets and the shippers have an advantage to get the drivers because they can afford to pay them more, just because their core business isn't trucking all day long. So it makes it easier to attract somebody if you're going to pay them a lot more money.
And I wanted to get some questions on. I want to do a thing where I get a CDL one day and record how it goes. Like, I'd love to do an informative thing to say, hey, what's it like getting your CDL? Because I think that we talk so much about the quality of drivers, but we forget that there's an entire ecosystem of schools, good schools, bad schools. What are good CDL schools? What do they look like if I want to apply? What are some of the hoops I need to get through to show for folks who are interested? Because I think that's such a fascinating thing. When I managed drivers, they were usually finished, like at US Express. They were done with the school. We had them with trainers, and then they became first seat drivers where they were finally promoted and trusted to drive on their own. But at the very beginning, do I just need to have a regular driver's license and a clean background check? Or what's the beginning of this pipeline look like to get my foot in the door for the school to prepare me for the test to get my CDL?
Right. So, we're a member of the Commercial Vehicle Training Association, the CVTA. So there's a big difference in a lot of our members' opinion on what a good school is and a bad school is, because there's a lot of bad schools out there, and there's a lot of schools who made the right investment in our state license and really take the time to follow a strict curriculum for training. And there's a lot of schools like ours that do that across the nation. So, first and foremost, you don't want to get ripped off. So the students don't want to get ripped off. They should pick a state licensed school, whether it's Illinois, Wisconsin, Missouri, California. Pick a state licensed school. Make sure you do your research on who's going to be doing your training, because you want to be a safe driver. You want to learn everything you can. Our program is 4 weeks, 160 hours. Most schools who are highly qualified and do a really professional job are like ours and offering a minimum of 160 hours of training before you even test for your CDL. I think a lot of our individuals who come in off the street, they really don't know what it's all about. They know it's, their brother was a truck driver, or their father was a truck driver, or their mother's been in the industry, and it's a good paying job and it's a great career. It's something you have forever. And, for those who like it, the 3 million CDL holders in this country, it's a great way to make wage and earn a great living. So I think a lot of people start from there, go, okay, how do I start? Basically, if you have a negative drug screen, you can get into school. I mean, it really, that's the big requirement. Like, you need to be, have a negative drug result, and you can enroll. And now you might not get a job on the other end because you might have some issue in your background, or you might have had a lot of accidents, and no one's going to hire you if you have those things in some cases. But you can certainly still get your commercial driver's license. Like, you can get your commercial driver's license and drive a cement truck, and maybe have something in your background. But there's lots of jobs out there if you have your commercial driver's license. It's like a job for life. So I think a lot of people find that appealing, and then they have to study like anything else. It's school, like, it matters. It's a 4-week course. You have to pay attention. It's amazing to me how many drivers go to unqualified schools, and they go and try and get that Walmart job, and Walmart rejects them because they're not a safe driver, or a big carrier rejects them because they put them through their driving test. They can't drive safely. So that's always amazing to me, how many people are on the road, and you don't really realize the driver next to you maybe hasn't been trained as you might think. And, there were 5,200 highway fatalities, I think, last year in this country, because of due to heavy truck fatalities. Now, not everyone was due to the truck. Some was maybe due to the automobile in front of them, but nonetheless, the truck driver gets blamed. So, safety and going to the right school and getting the right training here is super important. Like, who goes to their doctor for medical school? You don't do that. You go to a real school to get your medical training. Same thing for the trucking industry holds true.
That was one of the questions I had because there's been talk about the quality of drivers lately, and so the largest carriers will pay attention, and they have their list. It's kind of like Santa Claus, the good and the bad list. And so if you come from a school that they don't consider accredited, they won't give you the time of day. So if I didn't do my research and I went to a crappy school, I'd have to go to a carrier that is maybe more loosey goosey on the regs and maintenance and safety, and then it's like this snowball of poor outcomes because of not making the right call or doing your due diligence.
Yeah, well said. That's exactly what's happening. And that's why I think some of these big carriers, and like I mentioned, we started over here, the private fleets are rejecting so many drivers because they're not safe or they didn't go to a high quality school like ours or others who are state licensed. And then it's easy to detect that when you assess them in like an hour. It's, hey, show me how you back up the truck or show me how you preach up the truck. And if a driver can't do those things, they're not going to get hired by, highly reputable companies. But, look, I think we all know the majority of the industry are small carriers. And again, they don't have the funding. They can't afford safety and compliance departments. And they're giving these guys the keys. They're going down the highway, driving next to you and me every day.
Final thoughts here. Thank you so much for hopping on the show with me as well. One of the things I've learned is a challenge for the CDL pipeline is that in some states, I think Tennessee is one of them as well, to get your regular license, behind the wheel hours, BTW, some states are either not really enforcing it or don't require it. So the very folks who are going to try to learn a rig cannot learn to drive the small four-wheeler in the first place. And I always wondered if that was going to be a challenge when we were looking at trying to bring in younger generations.
Yeah, so we're licensed in 44 states across the country. And I'll give you an example. In the state of Tennessee, we're licensed by the Department of Education. In the state of Illinois, we're licensed by the Illinois Secretary of State. In the state of Ohio, we're licensed by the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. Each one of those states have different reporting requirements, training requirements for the student. States like North Carolina and Washington, and some of the most rigorous requirements for training, and others are more lax. So, it is a state by state thing, to your point. Now, the FMCSA tried to normalize that by putting in the entry level driver training rules, but unfortunately, a lot of people blew those off. And, the FMCSA doesn't have enough manpower to really regulate what they put in place. So it is an issue. I think it's a big industry issue. And like I mentioned earlier, the Commercial Vehicle Training Association has been all over this issue because you've got a lot of nefarious providers who aren't really training folks either per state laws or rules or statutes or per the federal, FMCSA basic requirements. And then you get unsafe drivers on the road. So yeah, there's a lot of variability by state, different rules by state. And, only until you operate in 44 different states, you recognize like how complex this little space is and how, and a lot of people aren't well educated on it and nor do they want to be. But it is the reality of CDL training and CDL schools across the nation.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for hopping on the show. If folks want to learn more about what you all are working on, get some information, learn what a good school looks like as well and what you guys have, what's the best way to get more details?
Yeah, you can easily go to 160drivingacademy.com or truckersnetwork.com and learn more about our job hiring capabilities. But either one of those sites will give you as much information, or reach out to me or our company at any time.
Perfect. Steve, thanks so much again. Always a pleasure getting to catch up. We'll see you again soon.
Thomas, thank you so much for having me today.
We're going to shift gears a little bit here, and we're going to switch to the broader economy. We're bringing on our FreightWaves in-house economist and researcher, Mr. Michael Rudolph. We had a recent release yesterday of the CPI data, which is always very fascinating. Michael, welcome to the show. We'll dive into it shortly. I have some fun pictures, and then we'll figure out, get your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been out here in the trenches for the past 3 years trying to make sense of the economy. And, every month, data comes in and doesn't make any sense. So we'll try and get to the bottom of it, but no promises.
I'm going to bestow it upon you. Hang on. I got a scepter here. Wait, we're going to make you an economist on air. I have the Genlog scepter. It's like Queen Elizabeth here. I anoint thee our official economist. People never told me I was a journalist until you become a journalist. You're like, you write, so I've written for years, and then they're like, oh yeah, they just add journalist or writer, and I was like, I'm an analyst. And it's like, well, guess what? You are this now, and it's like, all right, cool, whatever. So You have been anointed. Shout out to Gen Logs. We're going to have them on next week. So I love the fact this is under the desk. But okay, let's dive in here. I'm looking at the cameras. I wish we had this on video. Which one is okay? The one that's red. Dear God, man. I've been doing this for 3 years. Okay, CPI data. Let's dive in. One of the things that we're talking about for the Fed is going to be whether rates are going to be cut or not. For truckers, this is a big deal because if you finance a rig and rates are high, you're going to owe those pesky bankers more money. So tell us a little bit about this recent release that we have, and then we'll dive into the details on what won and what lost.
Sure, I'll tell you, not only is the Fed important just for truckers who have like financed equipment, right? Because it determines the rates on the loans that they can get for that. But I mean, the reason we talk about the Fed, which is so boring, is because of all of the different ripple effects that the rates have in the economy. So for truckers, it's not just the equipment, but it's also like how hungry are consumers for, revolving credit, like credit card spending, right? How much are they going to purchase? How much are businesses going to invest in their businesses, ramp up output? How much stuff will there be to move, in short? So that's the reason, just to put it in context, that's the reason this is all important. If we look at the inflation data from July, it wasn't terribly exciting. It wasn't too surprising. We saw a slight uptick, I think 0.2% month over month across all items. It was slightly cooler than expected on a yearly basis, but again, nothing crazy. What we've seen from the data is that interest rate traders are reacting very positively towards this. They're penciling in 3 rate cuts for the rest of the year. And the Fed has 3 meetings for the rest of 2025. All that they really needed to see is that the economy is not going to blow up because of inflation. Right? That's all the Fed needs to see. We've seen some weakness in the job market. That's the other kind of half of the Fed's dual mandate. The Fed has been unwilling to cut rates because they're like, well, tariffs are historically high. We're kind of dealing with some unprecedented stuff here. We can't move to cut rates until we know that inflation is not going to be a worry. We've had 3, more than 3, but like 3 solid months of like, yeah, the tariffs haven't really done too much for inflation. So the Fed should be licensed to act at each of their next meetings the rest of the year.
That was the big question I was curious about, was if everyone was waiting to see if tariffs were good or bad, and some of the hesitancy for the Fed to lower that key rate is because we just don't know how this is going to pan out in this very complicated economy.
Yeah, it's kind of been surprising to all of us because, we're trying to deal with logic from 100 years ago. It's like, how are tariffs going to impact the economy? Well, it's like, we know how it kind of impacted the economy back in the 1920s, but, our economy is so different. We really had no idea. So there was a lot of like fear, and a lot of that I think turned out to be unjustified but understandable. But it really just hasn't shown up in the inflation data yet.
I know for sure that my monkey brain could not process whether it was good news or bad. I think Mark Twain was ahead of the time. There's some kind of quote attributed to him as like, there's good news and bad news. The problem is we don't know which one is which. And so kind of one of those things. I want to pull up a chart, get your thoughts here. Consumer prices changed from a year earlier. Source is Labor Department / Wall Street Journal data here that they put it together. So this is one. Let's start with this one first. This is the CPI core versus the overall. So we have the big hump because of the COVID, and we have kind of settling elevated. Let me get your thoughts on what this looks like here. Core CPI was 3.1%, overall 2.7%.
So the core CPI is a little bit more important because it excludes the items with volatile pricing on a monthly basis, like food and energy. We'll talk about energy in a little bit, but the core CPI is a little bit hotter than expected in July. And so that kind of worried analysts just on the face of it, right? It's like, well, geez, maybe the tariffs are having an impact on core inflation. Core inflation is the kind of sticky inflation that's going to be around for the long while. Like food and energy, like I said, it comes with the seasons. You never really know. Even though core inflation was hotter than expected, it really wasn't about the tariffs. It was about services, not goods. We're talking about like medical care, I think, education. Let me just look through here.
We got the chart. Let's pull up the chart. There's a second chart here that shows bar charts, and it looks like one of those crazy pointy signs. Let's see if our folks can do it. This one should be called WSJ Consumer Price Index change, and it shows auto repair over 10% year over year, hospital services over 5, used vehicles, shelter, furniture, and all items. And we also saw that pesky grocery inflation. At the bottom, the interesting ones for declines. Wine at home. That's right, folks. You saved nearly 2%. Energy, internet service, and the craziest one I'd like to point out at nearly 15% decline year over year, smartphones. So I guess that we can't eat anything, but if I need my new iPhone, I'm in good shape.
Yeah, I mean, you can DoorDash something to your, front door, but like, it's going to be more pricey than expected, but maybe it'll even out over time. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, a lot of it you see, furniture, you see shelter there, which is kind of an iffy one. But yeah, it's hospital services, airline fare, auto repair. Like these are not things that are directly impacted by the tariffs.
And so that broader heating and the services economy is kind of where we're in. That even makes it more stickier because the goods and actual stuff is I guess there's a big split trying to figure out when you're turning all these levers. It's like, do I lower them and then it inflates it more, or do I keep them the same? Like, I would not want to be in a position right now if I was the chairman of the Fed with like two big levers.
Yeah, it's an unenviable job. I mean, no matter what, you're going to get crap from, half of the people watching you closely. I'd also point out that, there was this thing back when the tariffs were merely theoretical. There are people saying like, tariffs won't directly cause an increase in consumer prices. But there's always the possibility that since everybody believes that they will, and the businesses believe that they will, even if they don't directly contribute to a rise in prices, the businesses might just hike their prices anyways, right? Because everybody believes inflation is going to happen. Why not make it so, right? They're already prepared for it. So we can't really suss out like what is, driving the prices higher authentically and what's just, trying to pad your margins a little bit. So
I want to get your
another
thoughts on the
question.
effective fund rates as well. You have a really good chart from Sonar called the fedfunds.usa. It's the effective federal funds rate. It looks like Twin Peaks when you're looking at it. The fascinating one is this thing goes all the way back to 2006. Let's dive into that a little bit because it's very fascinating. When they talked about ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, it really puts that into perspective. It's like we really haven't had, other than the great before the financial crisis, an instance where interest rates were at this high for this long.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that you'll notice about all of the peaks in this chart, right, is that the rates climb a little bit slower than they fall. And when they fall, it's not a good sign when they fall that quickly because it means the economy is crashing and burning, right? Like we all remember 2008, 2009. We all remember 2020 when, the COVID pandemic just shocked like the economy, global economy. So that wasn't really like a good example of a recession, but yeah, certainly 2007, 2008, right? They just had to, deploy the airbags and just try and, resuscitate the economy by whatever means necessary. Hopefully, Fed Chair Powell is trying to say, like, we're not going to have that. We're going to lower rates, at a stable pace. We're not going to have to like pull the emergency lever, and we're going to time this thing. Of course, there are a lot of people saying like, "Oh, you're already too late, man." I mean, this is a lagging economic policy. Like, it just takes so long to develop across the economy. By the time you get around to cutting rates, by the time you feel justified, it's already too late. Like the labor market's going to be up in flames. That's what those people say. I'm not sure. It's been a very weird economy for the past 3 years.
And we got some more jobless. With the power of AI, I put together some also cool little things here. We had the JOLTS report, and we had GDP as well, non-farm payrolls. Let's go to the most recent one here. Consumer credit. This is very fascinating. On August 2nd, in June data, it rose 7.4 billion, up from 5.1 billion in May. Revolving credit rose 3.2 billion, non-revolving 4.2. How does credit kind of play into the economy? Because that's one of the very fascinating ones. I think we have a chart here as well for total revolving credit outstanding. That's going to be called CCOR.USA number 4. Talk to us about how the credit aspect also plays into the broader economy, because if you folks don't know about the U.S., we're really the hungry hippo, and it's mostly consumer spending that gives us the juice.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3/4 of the U.S. economy is just consumer demand. So, I mean, that's what this is all about. So that white line you'll see is just the revolving credit, which is like credit cards, right? Any kind of credit account where you have the debt, That's the consumers putting it on credit, putting it on layaway, whatever. That green line is just retail sales, e-commerce like Amazon and whatnot, right? So you'll see that that little weird gap in 2020, 2021 should be pretty obvious, but that's when everybody got those stimulus checks and were paying off their revolving credit. But also with the remaining money, they were getting a little something on the side from Amazon, right? Amazon's whole e-commerce business grew exponentially during the pandemic. We see that in the chart there.
What's
What
in this very
is
top right
weird
corner too? What does it
is
look like
that
with that?
if we want to expect anything to go, up and to the right, as it were, we would expect consumers' revolving credit to go up and to the right. Like they have a seemingly infinite appetite for putting it on their credit card. But what we've seen in 2025 so far is a lot of moderation, and yeah, the last release was pretty significant in a kind of subtle way, which is that it marked the second consecutive month in which revolving credit dropped, right? Just straight up. And this is the first time that you've seen a string of 2 months in which revolving credit dropped since April 2021, when everybody was still trying to figure out, what where their stimmy money was going to go, right? But now, without the stimulus, we see that the consumers are growing more cautious. They don't want to spend, and that's going to mean fewer things are getting loaded onto trucks. So it doesn't quite mean the same thing that it meant in 2021. It's a little bit more worrying. So yeah, I mean, the people that claim that the Fed might be too late in cutting rates, they might be right. I mean, we're seeing it in some of the data.
I think that's fascinating because when we looked at the freight conversations, we were expecting, the end of 2024 to 2025 that we'd finally come out of the trough. We would be in a pretty good spot in terms of consumption. It's very fascinating to see in this data just how much the total aggregate of consumers, everybody said, nah, dog, I'm going to just sit this one out for a minute and I'm going to just pay down some stuff because I may be tapped out. So we got a little bit of time left here. Any other charts that you are keeping an eye out that we can throw up here that you gave me that we need to think as we're moving towards the second half of the year? What is on your radar?
Sure. I mean, DTS.USA, I think I sent you that chart, just diesel retail prices at a truck stop, right? We look at the difference between core inflation and just broad, like headline inflation in July. And it's like, well, energy prices went down, right? And truckers are probably saying, the hell they did. But, gasoline prices are going down at a pretty significant rate. The catch is that other fuels, which includes diesel, was up 4.5% on a monthly basis. It rose 4.5% from June to July. And from May to June, it was up 0.7%. So, even though everybody's saying, well, energy is getting cheaper, we avoided that whole mess with Iran, diesel is going to be kind of sustained. It's going to have this sustained rally. It's going to plateau, I think, around where it is, especially as we go into the colder months when diesel is also used as heating oil. And so the truckers get competition from just regular consumers who want to heat their homes. Refining capacity is a little bit weak right now for diesel. We'll see if they can kind of bolster it. There's some stuff in motion, but for the meantime, fuel is probably going to stay about where it is.
Keep an eye on the fuel and energy. It definitely has one of those things where it's a leading indicator. Michael, thank you so much for hopping on the show, helping me digest this as well, because I majored in political science and dang it, I should have paid more attention to the economy. And even in my MBA, they gave me one of those crash courses. So you have helped educate me, sir. Thank you so much for hopping on. Folks want to check out what you're working on, research, anything else? Gotta give the plug. What you got?
I mean, I keep it pretty close to the chest, but you'll find me on FreightWaves.com. Every time I publish an article, which should be about a month from now or something. I don't know. Yeah, but you'll see when you see it.
Perfect. We'll catch up again soon, Michael. Thank you so much for hopping on. Always amazing information.
Take care.
We're coming up near the end of our wonderful show, folks. But if you're just listening here, we're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and SiriusXM, Road Dog Trucking Channel 146. And so, dear listeners, it's been an absolute pleasure. A little bit of housekeeping as well in the final minute or two. We have the Freight Tech 100 nominations. They are still going on. Go in there, put in a nomination. You got to pay for it. So as much as I recommend your dog, your friends, your wife, or your buddy's business, you really got to like them if you want to make sure. Important dates to remember, of course, is the September 1st. Nominations for the Freight Tech Awards are closing, so they close on 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday the 1st. On September 22nd, we are announcing the Freight Tech 100 winners, and then at the F3 Future of Freight Festival, we're going to be announcing the Freight Tech 25 winners. Those winners are, of course, selected from a third-party independent group of people who will go through the top 100 and pick the top 25. So definitely don't want to miss out on that. While you're at it, we have a special discount code to save yourself like $900. It is called WTTF325. That's What the Truck, WTTF325. That's right. So check that out as well. Don't want to miss it. Gonna have a really good show coming up the rest of the week, so you don't want to go away. And then I'm going to be partying hard all the way into next week as well. So absolute pleasure. Thank you all so much for watching, listening, and wherever else you may be consuming this. I'm Thomas Wasson. This is What the Truck. I'll see you again on Friday.